Have a nest, and for review today we'll have 5 papers. We'll have the Punch, the Guardian, the Vanguard, These Day, and the Nation. And let's see if we start right out today with a different paper, and let's see if we start with the Vanguard this morning. And on the Vanguard this morning, the leading story read, hazardous pesticides harm food production and exports. And this according to experts, and a whole lot of writers there. And let's just see if we take some. And over 23,100 metric tons of pesticides imported annually. And indeed is quite a disturbing one. Experts express deep concern and counsel the federal government on what needs to be done. But what you need to do, rather, is see if you take more of that story up on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. Let's quickly go to the topmost side of the Vanguard as we really look at the dailies today. Nigerians suffering bleeding at 65, and this according to Raf Obiora. And you can get more of that story on page 14. Jonathan will contest return to Aso Rock in 2027 on the PDP ticket. Well, anyway, you might be hearing the first time right here on Atlantic TV. And just read more of that story on page 13. But Jerry Ghana is giving his insight into all of it. What's on page 10 is INEC disclosed details of selection process for Yakubu's successor as Social Economic Rights and Accountability Project seems to be asking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do so. But anyway, I'll just tell you to grab more of that gist on page 10 of the Vanguard. Let's see if we take some other leading stories just at the side mask. No genocide against Christians in Nigeria, and these are credited to the federal government. And you remember the report came out just recently as Amnesty International is indicating that a whole lot of Christians have been killed in recent time. A sad reality, you say. But another sad one that seems to be more of a problem for us also is federal government wades into Dangote Pegasin face-off as strike begins today. Dangote blasts Pegasin. Only recall of members can stop strike, says Pegasin. And you can read more of that story on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. What's on page 9? Poxy. SEC raises alarm over AI-generated investment scam. And it's indeed one that is quite concerning. And still also on page 9, Custom commences one-stop shop cargo clearance. And indeed, one that will indeed quicken clearance, especially at our ports. Editors to security agencies stop misusing cybercrime act against journalists. And is one also will be adding our voice to, please, they should stop that, but do get more of that story on page 8. The picture of the day is more of fun and the emphasis on the need to be careful, especially with hazardous chemicals that is being used for food production. Pesticides and a whole lot seems to be harmful to our export gains. But anyway, that's the much we can take from the Vanguard.
Let's see what the Nation has for us this morning. The lead story reads, federal government intervenes in Dangote Pegasin role. And the rider says, oil workers union strike call condemnable, says Dangote refinery. Well, you can read more of that story on page 5 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the top mass. Back of industry upscales data protection. And the rider says banks bags ISO 27701 certification. And you can read more of that on page 28 of the paper. No discussion yet on zoning in ADC, says spokesman. That's on page 4 of the paper. 24 states to benefit from AFDB's backing on agric expansion. That's on page 4 of the paper. The ABC of NPC's decision on rate to curb inflation. That's on page 2 of the paper. We still have one at the top mass. Release AIG Imoquedes subsidy reports to unmark real beneficiaries. Otedela urges federal government. Well, you can read more of that story on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Let's see what we have at the bottom mass. No religious genocide in Nigeria, says Idris. And the rider says a mockery faults U.S. talk show host on alleged killing of Christians. Well, more of that story is on page 5 of the paper. A PSM mourns that former chairman Pari Osayode dies at 88. You can read more of that story on page 6. And the picture of the day, well, that's the interdenominational church service ahead of the 65th Nigeria Independence Day celebration at the National Christian Center in Abuja yesterday. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on The Nation. Let's see what this day has for us today. The lead story, Ghana. Nigerians now know the difference after Buhari, Tinubu wants Jonathan back. And the writer says ex-president will contest 2027 poll in PDP. Niger PDP elects new officials. Well, you can read more of that story on page 5 of the paper. Federal government rubbishes international claims of religious genocide in Nigeria. And the writer says Idris says over 13,443 terrorists, a criminal neutralized, discloses 10,000 hostages rescued. Well, that's on page 5 of the paper. The top mass, federal government wades into Dangote Pengassan disputes as the union begins strike action. And the riders say oil workers direct shutdown of gas, a crude supply to refinery. Refineries management says Pengassan's action lawless. Well, that's on page 5 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the bottom mass. Back of Industry gets iOS 27701 certification for milestone in data protection. That's on page 9 of the paper. And the picture of the day, that's the Ogun State Governor Prince Dakpo Abiodun during his ongoing investment trip to China. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on this day. Let's see what the Guardian has for us. The lead story says, Nigeria risks a 14.7 billion naira daily loss, a fuel crisis as Dangote Pengassan rift deepens. Well, that's on page 5 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the top mass. Insecurity. ADC says Tinubu unqualified to seek a United Nations Security Council seats. Well, that's on page 3 of the paper. Federal government others urge unity, a shared responsibility at the 65th Independence Service. That's on page 3 of the paper. Oshun Nolge, PDP query federal government, demand details of released local government funds. That's on page 8 of the paper. Still at the top mass, Otedola asks federal government to release subsidy panel report on Mark's real beneficiaries. And the writer says describes Umar Soni claims as mischievous, baseless, product of ignorance. Says Zenon never traded petrol, could not claim subsidy, moves to sue for 1 billion naira over a libel. Well, you can read more of that story on page 35 of the Guardian newspaper. Let's see what we have at the side mass. Punishing suicide attempts undermines mental health reforms. Well, that's on page 8 of the paper. A SEC warns of AI investment scams targeting Nigerians. That's on page 4 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the bottom mass. Resident doctors issue federal government's 30-day ultimatum over unmet demands. That's on page 9 of the paper. Bandits kill 10, kidnap several in Kwara State. That's on page 45 of the paper. A federal government dismisses religious terrorism allegation. That's on page 45 of the paper. And we have a chat for the day. The chats for the day is about the global causes of death and the risk factors for CVD. It's a World Heart Day, and cardiovascular disease burden worsens and shortage of especially. So that's talking about the increase of the cardiovascular diseases and the shortage of CVD specialists. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on The Guardian. Up next is The Punch.
Well, The Punch will be definitely the last paper for us to quickly look at. And the leading story on The Punch newspaper this morning, marketers fear fuel price hike as Pegasus strike begins. And riders to that, oil union order shutdown of power plants, urges military forward crude supply shortage or stoppage. And TUC threatens strike, members on standby as federal government intervenes to meet Pegasus today. But I'll tell you to meet more of that story on page 43 rather, sorry, of the Punch newspaper. Let's see if we take some other leading stories just at the topmost side of the Punch this morning. And Christians not endangered or marginalized. Federal government tackles critics on page 7. Adamawa ADC gives a Tiku ultimatum to pick membership card is also a screaming one on page 7. And what's more of issues arising is Otedola to Umar Sani, your ignorance in subsidy claims is alarming. And I'll tell you not to be alarmed about that story, but to read it all up on our page 19 of the Punch. Let's see if we take some other leading stories, especially at the Sadma side of the Punch. Petrol export hits 371 billion naira amid heavy import reliance. And I'll just tell you to get more of that story on page 56. Well, it's painful, and I hope it's not true. I just hope it is not the way to go. Pro-Wike lawmakers absent at Fubara's Independence Thanksgiving. Please, we are not ready for another drama in Rivers. The issue has been resolved. This is not the best way to go. But I'll tell you to go grab a copy of the Punch, read all of that story on page 9. 2027, NGE warns politicians against personal attacks. This is also on page 8. We're talking at the bottom side of the Punch. Police rescue trafficked Ghanaian, arrest 5 in Ogun. And you can understand that they are trafficked to Nigeria. Nigerians are trafficked to Ghana, and quite disturbing on page 5. And Oshun PDP and APC clash as federal government releases local government allocation. And we'll say hallelujah to that. That battle has been ongoing for quite a long time. But I'll just tell you not to waste more time. Read that story up on page 8. But the picture of the day is more of the government council of the Ajayi Crowther University in Ogun State, and Oyo State, and you can get all of that. That's more like a picture of the day. All of that transpired yesterday. You can see the Vice Chancellor and other members of the governing council of that very great institution. Well, anyway, that's the much we can take from the Punch. And funny enough, from the Dailies this morning, you know I will always employ you, if you find any really interesting, or do yourself a great deal, if you just go grab a copy of any of them and go through to see how you can get yourself abreast with a whole lot of issues. Talking about the breast, let's say we just have 2 or 3 of the leading stories, especially as it concerns major ones. And the one that seems to be the screamer is that of Jerry Ghana, especially on the front page of these days, saying that, well, it looks as if we've all now seen the era of the APC, and many persons are surely interested to see former President Goodluck Jonathan return back to seat. And he, like he said, will be vying for the presidency on the platform of the People's Democratic Party. Messi, I know you it looks as if Jerry Ghana seemed to have an update information about the intentions of former President Goodluck Jonathan contesting for the seat of Mr. President come 2027. Any surprise?
Okay, no, I'm not really surprised. Well, when he said that we've known the difference between Buhari, Tinubu, and now we want Jonathan back, it's more or less saying that, okay, you want to go back to your ex? That's the way it sounded right now. Like, I remember back then when it was time for, I think, Tinubu and, you know, during Buhari time, we were complaining. And some persons, I was seeing the trend on Facebook and everywhere on social media saying that we should pray that we don't, like, the previous regime is not better than the one we're about to enter. And I don't know what it seems like now, but for Nigerians wanting Jonathan back, and during Jonathan time, funny enough, they were complaining, saying a bag of rice used to be 5,000 naira. How come bag of rice is now 8,000 something? And now we're buying bag of rice for close to 100,000 naira. And suddenly you want the miracle worker to come back. I don't understand. Is he going to perform any miracle? Well, let the best win. That's what I have to say.
Well, anyway, I would need to see if your ex gives you peace of mind. I don't know. Well, it's your choice to make. Whether you stay with your present or your ex, well, it's your decision and what you gain from it. But like I will say, everybody has a right to contest, especially.
Of course.
It's their civic responsibility also to see how they can add their quota to it. But still also talking about issues, one that seems not to be one we'll smile about or laugh about is the issue of Pegasus and Dangote really going back and forth, especially with the issue of the workers. Yes, it's quite disheartening to find that we're entering a new week and a week of anxiety looking at what would definitely happen if, and I repeat, if Pegasin goes on strike, the oil sector would greatly be impaired, and about 14.47 billion will be lost daily on account of that. Mercy, we're really neck deep into this issue once again, and I just hope, come on, we don't go down towards this route.
I don't know why we keep talking about this issue. And then, why is it that it's when something has escalated, that's when the federal government tend to intervene? Like, this issue has been lingering for long, and they kept deaf ears. They didn't respond to it until now that they threatened to strike today, and of which they might go on strike. And the truth is, I feel the federal governments are really doing all of that because they don't get affected by all of this fuel subsidies, fuel strike, and all of that. We are the one at the receiving end. We Nigerians, we the masses, we the citizens, we are at the receiving end. So whenever it happens, we are all going to face it. And this federal government, they don't get to face all of this. And that's why, I don't know, this is something you should have called both parties and resolved this thing amicably until it got to this point. And now they've threatened to strike today. And we don't even know our hopes. We don't even know what to believe for today. We don't know if after now we're going to see fuel to drive back home or whatever. We don't know. We are just here, just waiting to see the latest updates on the Pegasan and Dangote refinery. Well, it is what it is.
Well, anyway, all I will say, if you are really athletic and you feel there's a need to get a bicycle, well, this will be the best time for you to try and get one. So at least you can also be able to move around, especially knowing that looks as if this issue will linger for a while. But in all honesty, yes, the federal government had, in one time or another, tried to see if they will mend fences, but it looks as if the fence is not ready to be mended or repaired in any way, and it's really becoming more of a problem for Nigerians and this great country. But anyway, that's the much you can take from the dailies.